Hi, my name is Melissa Obenchain, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about my project today. I call it Backyard Beginnings, and I currently live in Issaquah, Washington, and my faculty mentor was Marjorie House. So a little bit about me. I came to this course about 2 years ago, and I had recently moved up to the area and just got really excited about permaculture, really excited about using the yard that we have, and just kind of getting involved in all of these skills. And, 2020 happened and life happened and things got really tough for a while, as they did for a lot of people. And I kind of just fell off for a bit and things felt really overwhelming and really difficult. We had a lot of challenges thrown our way, but I started to have this pull to get back into it about 6 months ago. And I really felt that so many of the things that have been difficult in the last couple of years are also very much the proof as to why this course and these principles and these ethics are so incredibly important going forward, because it's just so needed to create a much healthier life for all of us. And so I got back in touch with my mentor and I reapproached all of the modules and got back into it. So here's what I came up with. So anyway, I currently live in Issaquah, Washington. It is a suburb town. It's outside of Seattle, and it's very much a connected kind of suburb bedroom community to the greater Seattle area. So even though Issaquah itself is only about 40,000 people, we are surrounded by millions of people, but then bordered on one side by the Cascade Mountains. And my partner, Josh, and I, we run a small business together, taking packs of high energy dogs on multi-mile, multi-hour off-leash hikes up in the Cascades. So we kind of drive around in the morning, pick up all of our dogs for the day, and then take them on these big hikes for a few hours and bring them back to their people. So it's really fun. We really love our job. We love working for ourselves. And it's been a really great position for us to be in for a couple of years. That being said, the area is changing and the cost of living here is rapidly outpacing the ability for us to keep up. And so we do know that the writing is on the wall in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things coming down the pipeline that are changing what we have going forward. So that's a big part of why I called this project Backyard Beginnings. We know that our time here is limited. We know that we have big dreams of becoming homeowners and having a little bit of acreage one day. And so we've decided to take what we have going on here and this position that we're in and this house with this really great yard and this job, and use it to really jump off and get involved in this practice and learn as much as we possibly can, with every bit of it intended to be temporary by design and intended to be able to be grown and made larger when we get to our future home that hopefully is going to have a little bit more space. So our big picture vision is that we really just want to buy a home on a modest piece of property, and we really want to be located in or near a smaller community in which we can really dig deep and set some roots. We both are not really city folk, and this area, like I mentioned, has vastly outpaced us in population and cost. And we just really want to reconnect with nature and live in a much more sustainable way than we feel we can linked up to the city here. So that's kind of the bigger picture, and we're trying to get there in the next 1 to 2 years, depending on how this market continues to run away from us. But our goals to get there, and the main goals and the outcome of this PDC include learning how to grow a variety of fruits, vegetables, and various herbs and things like that, to begin practicing subsidizing all of our own food and having like a kitchen garden and maybe a little herb garden, learning how to make some herbal teas or poultices, things like that. I'd also like to gain skills in food storage techniques, as well as seed collection techniques. Those are things that I've never really delved very far into, if at all. And so things like pressure cooker canning or dehydrating, things like that. I'd really like to gain a lot more skills in soil restoration techniques. I have a general academic understanding, but this is the first place I've lived where I actually had a chance to really put, hands-on and try it. So we're going to be practicing a bunch of things like bokashi, vermicomposting, creating compost piles, everything on a very small scale, but just to kind of practice getting involved in it and learning how to do it and using those soil restoration techniques for just our minimal raised beds, and then moving forward from there. We are looking to greatly reduce our overall waste production, and we do consider recycling and any compost that leaves this site picked up by the city as waste because it isn't part of the closed loop on site. And we are also wanting to create spaces in our home for kind of those more invisible structures. So we really are both artistic people, and we want to create and maintain good spaces in our yard and in our garage and in our home for our different art practices that we're both interested in, and for the different movement and like health and movement practices. So like yoga and some small weightlifting and things of that nature. And we are also looking to create a space in our home in which we can host effectively. It's definitely not a large space, but we do have a guest room, we do have a patio, and we really love the idea of hosting dinners, ideally from vegetables that we've cooked or that we've grown. We love the idea of hosting our friends and our family to come into town for weekends and stay with us for a while. So we want to create a very welcoming and vibrant space, even if it is a small welcoming and vibrant space. So this is our house, or our side of the duplex here. As you can see on the left, that is the shared wall and the shared window over there. So that's all the other side of the duplex. So I live in a cul-de-sac in which there are 3 buildings that are identical to this one, so 6 total units. And then the pictures on the bottom are some little shots of like parts of our backyard and our patio. So for all of my maps, I opted to do my maps drawn by hand with just a little bit of computer overlay. And this was intentional. It was to help me just really start making sure that I started that practice of art again and drawing again. But I do have every intention of learning the computer skills to do all the layering, the maps online, because I know that going forward for any kind of larger project, that is going to be much more efficient. But this was kind of a fun way to get me pulling out those colored pencils again and just getting started. So anyway, this is my base map. It just kind of outlines all of the main structures, the house, the yard, the fence line, sheds, things like that. For my zones, I actually chose to break that up into 2 different maps. The first map is my inner zones. So that's zones 1 through 3. And my reasoning for this is because this space is relatively small, there's almost no place here that really is considered an outer zone. I mean, we visit all of the spaces quite frequently and use them quite frequently. So I really considered them all in those inner zones. For the outer zones, though, it occurred to me that the place that we work fits that the best, because we hike and work off the exact same piece of land every day. Josh has worked that land for 7 years, and I'm going on 2.5 years now. So we know the trails really well. We forage there seasonally. Right now it's berry season. It's amazing berries, mushrooms in the spring and fall, nettle picking. We also do a lot of stewardship of the land up there. We help maintain the trails. We, just kind of our presence on site, kind of helping keep an eye on things. If there's like poaching activity that we see, we work with DNR on that. So we really view our use of this space kind of as our outer zones. It is wild, it is relatively unmanaged land, but we make our mark. So for all of my sectors, I actually chose to kind of combine a couple of the maps because it just made more sense to me that way. So my first map is the human element map. And for me, that combined all of the human elements, our pathways, our patterns and flows. It involved all of the structures, both physical structures and invisible structures. So you can see like all of the purple arrows, those are all our main walking pathways to and from our vehicles, in and around the house. Anything with like spiraling images, that's places where we kind of tend to circle and congregate. So on the patio as like a social dynamic, or in the living room, either to do yoga, read books, watch movies, things of that nature. And probably the biggest thing to note with involving the human element is the fact that because we are in a suburb and because we are in the types of living situations that we are in, we are surrounded by people. So we have a lot of neighbor interactions. So to the viewers left, that's that shared wall with our neighbor that we share the duplex with. We actually have a very good relationship with them, but there are always, noise issues and privacy issues when you're sharing wall spaces and sharing parking spaces and things. Our neighbors out front that we share the cul-de-sac with, it's exactly the same. We have a fantastic cul-de-sac, fantastic neighbors, very, very lucky in that respect. But, you know, we are sharing one driveway, one main parking area, and all of our housing units face each other on this cul-de-sac. So from a noise and a privacy perspective, you know, we can hear a lot of things. And then to our backyard is some housing, some single family housing, but they are very large houses. And so there's definitely a privacy issue back there. There's multi-story homes that have windows just like staring at us. So one of the big issues that we're kind of looking to address here is privacy screening. And then to the right, we share that fence line with an apartment complex. So that is probably the most problematic neighbor barrier, due to a few reasons, one of which is that because it's a complex, there are dozens of people. So there's noise, there's privacy, there's traffic, things like that. It is also a complex that is owned by a large company, a large corporation that owns a ton of properties. They do not stay, manage, live on site. And frankly, they don't care about their neighbor relations. So dealing with them with any kind of shared property issues has always been difficult for all the neighbors in the neighborhood. Everybody seems to be on board with that. The other potential kind of problem from that side is the entire fence line is covered with this very aggressive laurel tree, that the laurel bush hedgerow that's been planted. It's incredibly tall. It drops toxic berries. It shades out a good portion of our yard and our neighbor's yard. So that's kind of a big thing that we contend with from a toxicity point of view for our animals, and from a microclimate point of view from like blocking the sun. So we, for our resources, waste, and technology maps, I combined all of these together, and it's structurally, there's very little that we can change in this realm, being that we are renters and being that we are in a duplex sharing things like water with the neighboring unit. All of our water is connected to the city. All of our power is off of the grid. Our garbage collection, everything is from the city once a week. And there's very little we can do to structurally change where our gray water goes or how we get power while we're here. So our big priorities here is just reducing our impact as much as possible and learning as much as we can about systems so that we can have better ones in the future. The one area that has really come up as a flag for us, though, is our transportation. And by default with our business, because we go out and pick up these packs of dogs and then take them out to the trailhead and then take them home, both Josh and I each have a truck. And they're relatively efficient trucks, Ford trucks, but they're still not great. And we both drive a lot. And we don't love that. We don't feel great about it, but there's really not a huge workaround right now. So we have acknowledged ways in which we can make our routing much more efficient. We've actually dropped entire segments of clients that were just way too far out of the way. So we're working through that. We're also working on paying off these trucks so that we can be in a better financial position, that at the same time that better hybrid trucks are coming along, that maybe we can trade out and at least trade in for one or both to be hybrid trucks, because it seems like that technology is coming around. It's also very cost prohibitive for people like us at this moment. So we're looking to the future there. For the climate and garden maps, these are the ones I actually expanded on even more and kind of zoomed in on different areas of our yard, because the areas of our yard are so different in the way they function, I guess. So for my edges and microclimates, this one I did for the yard as a whole. And in general, I would say the biggest kind of single, thing to think about here is, for me, is that the path of the sun and the seasonality. Because of the way that our house is situated, we actually have very distinct sections of our yard with regard to what kind of sun and shade and climate they have. So this little backyard area here, it gets really good kind of sparse morning sun. It stays relatively cool because it's shaded in the afternoon and the evening. It does become a little bit of a wind tunnel when the breeze picks up, but it's pretty protected, but not very sunny. And then the side backyard area, and right along the very, very edge by that apartment complex, almost never gets sun. That hedgerow is so tall and so dense, and especially with the sun's path in the winter, spring, and fall, it's very, very, very shady. The front yard, on the other hand, gets that kind of southwest west sun, and especially in the height of summer, it is incredibly sunny, incredibly warm. And this area along the house especially is probably our hottest, driest little microclimate, because it's covered by an eave. So there's not, if it rains, there's no rain that gets onto that soil. It only gets water when we water it. It's up against a brick wall and it's in the direct evening sun. So we really kind of congregate our sun-loving, warm-loving, dry-tolerant plants in this area. And then we really have to pay attention to the areas of the yard that just don't receive any sun whatsoever. So in the front yard, I kind of highlighted a couple of different areas, and this area off to the side where all of the raised beds are, that is where we will be growing the majority of our actual food. That is where we have the most control over our watering. We have decent sun, and we are able to kind of just congregate the majority of our fruits and vegetables. So I've got kind of a map here of spring, summer, and fall, kind of what I have been planting or will be planting. On the other side of the front yard, closer to the parking area, that part of the yard kind of has to remain primarily grass. That's something that our landlord does want us to maintain, is where the grass is existing right now, to keep it there. But we've had a little bit of flexibility in where we can build other raised beds. So we're kind of working with that. So in this front yard area, we are looking to do, like along the window, a lot of our, like I said, our kind of sun-loving, dry-tolerant types of vegetables and or herbs. So we've got like rosemary. We're going to put things like peas and carrots in the spring because they'll get that sun early in the spring. And then as it gets hotter, things like our peppers and stuff like that. And then in the backyard, kind of off to the side, we are going to be doing a lot more container gardening for a few reasons. The first is that this little creek, that kind of rocky creek that I'm following with the arrow here, that connects all of the water runoff from the roof, from the downspouts. And that's fantastic. And it kind of helps water this inner bed, except that the downspouts come off of our pretty toxic tar shingle roof. So we don't really want to grow anything edible in there. So we're sticking to bushes and shrubs and flowers and things like that. And then we're going to line the creek with containers that have food in it that we would water with a different source of water. And then on the actual patio itself, we are looking to really hone in on some of our skills with vertical gardening. This is where we have a lot of the issues with privacy, with that second-story house looking right down on us. So looking at doing trellising and trellising of climbing plants and flowers to make an aesthetically pleasing, but a little bit more of a privacy barrier. And then doing a lot of like containers of things like lettuce and herbs and things of that nature that can be almost like a kitchen garden. And then the very back space that sits right behind our garage, this is kind of our most hands-off space. And the reason for that has to do with the watering. Down here in the corner is a shared water spigot with our neighbors. However, it's attached to a hose that runs all along the side of the house over by the patio, and that's where the actual hose reel has been mounted on the house. So just by default, this area is like the farthest away from where the water actually comes out of the hose. And so we tend to kind of address it the least. So we have, and because it only gets that morning sun, but it doesn't get a ton of sun, we've opted to kind of stick with more native plantings and non-edible plantings that don't really need a lot of our attention, but maybe can feed pollinators or just provide flowers for us, or aesthetically pleasing to look at through the kitchen window. So we've put in a bunch of different like sword ferns and salmonberry and the native bleeding heart that we got from Josh's parents' house up the hill a little ways. We dug it out of their yard, things like that, that we can maybe come back here twice a week with a little bit of water, do a little bit of pruning here and there, but mostly let this area be its own little kind of wild space. And then the grass area kind of in the middle, that space we have to leave as grass. And it's also kind of the space where the dogs use as like their bathroom. So it's kind of easy to have just like bordered by garden beds and then kind of off limits. So for our soil history and our soil goals in this property, we are both looking to increase our ability to have like soil restoration skills. When we came to this house, the yard was muddy clay. It's like a millimeter of clay, and then it's right to the pea gravel and the fill gravel underneath. The grass was really unhealthy. Like everything was just really not taken care of. Due to the time constraint of just being here for a couple of years and not knowing what kinds of pesticides or things were maybe used before we got here, we opted to build raised beds and rely pretty heavily on raised beds and container gardening and imported kind of more natural and organic soils for our food growing, while at the same time building our skills in soil restoration by learning about composting and vermicomposting and mulching and all of that on the soil that's like in the ground while we're here, and trying to regenerate it while we're here, but not necessarily with the goal of being able to grow food out of it within these couple of years, because we're not quite sure that we'd get there. The other thing that we're kind of working on is in the areas where we do have to maintain the lawn, trying to increase the health of the soil there by doing different techniques like letting the lawn just grow longer in between mowings and allowing for things like the dandelions and the clover to come around and be a little more of like a mowable meadow and some pollinator habitat than just straight grass and lawn. So I'm trying to do that. So here's a components and connections kind of visual. Just lists all the things that we're doing and the arrows that they connect to. So here's my components map. And obviously there's a whole bunch here, but one of the areas that I kind of wanted to highlight that I was, I guess, a little bit extra proud of is kind of our watering compost system thing that I'm kind of circling down here in the bottom right corner. So with everything being in mind that it needs to stay temporary here, we also really wanted to address the fact that we don't want to have to keep always watering just from city water and costing the money of all the city water and the chlorine that's in a lot of the city water, frankly. So we decided to kind of combine and stack functions. And in the corner here, we're going to build a compost pile. But before we wanted to do that, we knew we needed to keep it dry because, 8 months out of the year in this area, it just rains and rains and rains. So we decided we were going to build a little rooftop that was at a slight slant, and we're going to get a series of water barrels and be able to create like a rainwater collection water barrel system where the rooftop also shields the compost pile during the winter so that that can maintain itself. And then we can run drip lines from those water barrels into our raised beds. All of this, like even the roof, everything we did on pure blocks so that it can, or did or will do, the barrels are not in yet, so that when it comes time to move, we can pick it all up, take it with us, and maybe in our new space, we'll have a 6 or a 9 or a 10 barrel collection system, and we can just grow off of that, but have something small for this space here. So I thought that was kind of a fun component that we came up with. We've also built in a lot of spaces for hosting and dancing and creativity and play and exploration, because I think that's important to both of us. We've added in mason bee houses. We have bike and tool storage so that we're going to be doing a lot more biking around here. And then we're turning our garage into a combination of recreation equipment and storage for all of our hobbies, as well as an entire space that is going to be dedicated to, Josh is really into tie-dyeing, and it's going to be a whole art space in there. So we're each going to have kind of our own space in the house where we have our artistic places. And I've got my little dance space out in the front yard or in the living room. So this is a little resource map, and I did my diagram kind of as a tree, and then all the branches of the tree and the different resources that we have to draw on with our community and our friends and our family. And then with our implementation phases, this actually down here shows that roof I was talking about. And this particular part was from this last winter, so that most of these are already done. But one of the things that I did is in each phase of implementation, I broke it down by the zones that it acknowledges to try to help me make sure that I was balancing, every phase of implementation. I wanted to have at least one or a couple of things addressing each zone and making sure that I wasn't like just hanging out in the vegetable garden or just dancing 1 week or something like that. And then the thing that the kind of big, I guess, end stop on our implementation is, so coming into the spring and summer of 2022, that is kind of the initial end to this project. That is around the time where we are hoping to have enough money saved up to very seriously begin looking to buy a home. That is also the time frame in which we have found out the land we work on will be logged and our rent will be raising about 40% over what we're paying now. So those things combine make us feel pretty confident that next summer very well could be the end of our time here. We may also end up staying one more year after that, depending on how things shake out. So my implementation really only goes through next spring or summer, with a note at the bottom that if we choose to stay another year, if that works out, then we would just kind of move on from there. And then the remaining slides are essentially just my stakeholder interviews, different notes and summaries and drawings that I did throughout the course to try to like get this all together. So I guess that's pretty much all of it. All right, so in conclusion, that was my project, and it's been a challenging couple of years, but it's been really good for me and a really good experience to be a part of this project and to dig into all of this material and put it to work and put it to practice. And I've really enjoyed the experience, and I'm so looking forward to what permaculture and this community of women that this PDC has connected me to, what it has in store. And I really have a lot of gratitude for the Permaculture Women's Guild and for Marjorie House for like helping make all of this available to people like me who are passionate about this, but just needed a place and a way to siphon our energy and work towards these futures. So I look forward to what it has in store. Thank you.